Good day, everyone. This is the second video about the NENA emergency number professional exam preparation. This one focuses on the E9-1 terminology. My name is Ravi and I work for a PSAP in Canada. So let's dig a bit into the history of the 911 and how it evolved over time. The first 911 call was made back in 1968 in Haleyville, Alabama, and uh, and that was offered as basically a basic 911 service. That's a single number, whether you want to call police or fire and ambulance. You pick up your phone and then dial 911, and you'll be connected to a party, and they in turn will ask you what you need, and they will dispatch the necessary services to wherever you need. The the telephony end offices, let's say they have 30,000 or 40,000 subscribers. One end office can send all the 911 calls just a single destination. But for smaller towns with a population of, let's say, 10,000 or 15,000, uh, one end office may serve multiple towns, and it's really hard to send the 911 calls to all the PSAPs. So I don't really know what happened during that time. I would assume that the 911 will go to a primary PSAP and they will in turn transfer the call to the other PSAPs. That's how it should have been happened, could have been happened. Um, uh, One of the basic problems with the 911, basic 911 is that an end office may serve customers in multiple towns. As I said, it's called overlap, or multiple end offices can serve one town, which is called underlap. Even though I don't really know what exactly the problem with this approach, though, there is nothing wrong in really a large town like Los Angeles or San Francisco, which can serve multiple end offices, but each of them programmed to go to one particular PSAP. In the in the early days of basic 911, the caller's name and address were not delivered when the call is made, but subsequently, when the PSAPs were connected to the end offices using the what is called the camera trunking. We'll talk about camera trunking in subsequent videos, but bear with me. When the camera trunking was added, at that time, the PSAPs were able to query the address of the subscriber, but it is not E9-1 as a standard which was established a little bit later. So the core think of enhanced 911 or E911 revolves around the concept of what is called a selective routing. It is a process by which the selective router, basically the gear in the telephone provider, can route a call based on the address. But the selective router itself does not really know anything about the address, but the telephony carriers use a variety of databases which map the street addresses to what is called the emergency service zones and emergency service number, which turn points to a specific PSAP. Uh, let us say one head office serves multiple towns, and each of those municipalities have their own PSAPs. As long as the selected router knows that one particular number belongs to a customer who lives in town A, they will be able to send those calls to the PSAP that serves town A. And subsequently, when a call is made by a customer in town B, they will be based on the number that that subscriber is dialing from. They can send the call to the PSAP that is serving the town B. That is a core thing of the selective routing. And enhanced 911 is also has any and ALE, very similar to the way the basic 911 worked, as well as the selective transfer and alternative routing. So let's talk about, I briefly touched on, mentioned about the emergency service zone. So the proper definition of an ESZ or emergency service zone is that uh, it's a it's a geographic area that has a unique combination of the responding agencies like fire, police, and ambulance services. So uh, the uh, the boundary of a geographic area is determined by the 911 authority for that municipality or state or province by basically overlaying the following GIS layers on top of each other to create a single map. That's essentially the serving primary PSAP and then serving secondary PSAP. That's an optional parameter, and the locality name, the municipality or the community we call it as an option, and the service boundary of the fire services, ambulance services, as well as the police service. Those they create what is called the JS layers, and they layer them one by one, and that process will yield polygons and a map with authoritative boundaries for the responder agencies. Each geographic area is represented by a polygon that is uniquely identified by this combination of the responder agencies is called an emergency service zone. That is uniquely identified by anywhere from, here I mentioned a 3 to 5 digit number, but it could be a 2 digit to 5 digit number depending on the telecom provider. But typically it is 3 to 5 digit number in the states, and that number is called an emergency service number. So, just to give a visual idea of how those JAS layer work, I printed out these services for the province of Alberta and Canada. The first one is for RCMP, which is basically the police service, and the next one is the fire, and the third one is the Alberta Health Services. Uh, Canada has the universal health system. Basically, the entire province is under the control of the Alberta Health Services or AHS zones. This is not the actual map that is used to create the emergency service zones. So this is this is this is not the right one. But just to illustrate the concept, this would do. So uh, even though these are physically printed maps, the software can do this job. The three layers, along with additional like a piece of boundaries and the municipality boundaries, they layer this on top of each other, which will create the polygons. Like the city of Calgary is here, and that will be one polygon, and the Edmonton will be another polygon. So that they will the telephony provider, which is basically TELUS in the province of Alberta, that will assign the emergency service number to each of the polygon, and that actually looks like this. This is this is a representative map, because these are real numbers that's used in the emergency service zones today. But this is not complete. Obviously, there are over 850 emergency service zones in Alberta, but I have identified only the major population areas like Calgary and then Edmonton, under anything over 10,000 in the towns and municipalities, and then marked them here. So I essentially meant to use this as a conceptual understanding as opposed to use a reference. I want to make it very clear this is not a complete map and nobody should use this as a reference. But it should illustrate the concept that the 911 authority in Alberta will create such a map and assign the emergency service zone, uh, so that any calls made from this particular zone will be routed to the correct piece of serving for the people living in this geographic area. So it worth mentioning that it is the role of the 911 authorities under the state or the municipality, whatever the model state follows, who will determine the boundaries of an emergency service zone and they will choose from a range of the emergency service number provided by the carrier. Here in Alberta, it is TELUS. The emergency service number plays a central role in routing the calls in an E9-1 network by determining which piece of will receive the call, and once the piece of receives the call, and what agencies will respond to the call, tagged with a specific ESN. For just to give an example, Calgary uses the ESN of number 10, and it is served by the Calgary Police Department and the Calgary Fire Department, as well as the Alberta Health Services. So any call made by a citizen in Calgary will be tagged with the ESN of 10, and when it goes to the Calgary 911 PSAP, and that will automatically tell the telecom indicator who will be the responder agency. For police, it's the Calgary Police Service, etc. That is the whole idea behind the emergency service zone and the emergency service number. So I just want to mention one more thing. Yeah, so an emergency service zone is a geographical area bound by the unique combination of those services, and the emergency service number is the actual numerical representation of an emergency service zone. Those those things, people use those words as synonymously, but these are two different things. Uh, but depending on the context, they mean people usually mean the same thing. Next, let's talk about what's called the automatic number identification, or ANI. ANI and ALI are the common terminology used in the PSAP. The automatic number identification refers to the display of the telephone number for incoming 911 call. For calls made from residential landlines and cellular phones, it is the 10-digit number associated with the device. For the business lines, though, specifically if they are behind a PBX, as I told previously, uh, uh, there could be a large number of devices behind a PBX served by only a very small number of the outbound trunk lines. And usually a PBX is fronted by a 10-digit pilot number, and that's the one the PSAPs will see, even though those telephones could be in a different building, and potentially they could be in different cities as well. But that this is the number the PSAPs will see whenever a call is made, and that is called the automatic number identification. 10-digit number uh, from the device the call has been made. ALI, or the automatic location identification, is the display of the location of the caller at the PSAP um, the call processing system. It will also have the supplementary emergency information about the location from the call originates. And there is two processes, early request and early retrieval, are the processes by which a PSAP queries an early database and receives the response with the location and other available information respectively. So let's say somebody is driving a car, and he made a 911 call. So the call may take, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. During that time, the uh, the the location of that car constantly changing. The piece of we have the ability to get the updated location for the phone, and even after the call is terminated, for quite some time they will be able to get the new location for the cellular phone. So this is the process they call early request and early retrieval. It's also called ICLU or rebate, depending on the PSAP, and you'll be able to get the updated location for the cellular phones. It is not really much meaningful for the landlines, but for the cellular phones it is very much useful for the agencies. So there is something called the pseudo NA or the PANI. Essentially, when the E9-1 standard was developed, there were no cellular phone. It was, I don't know, maybe 25 years ago. There were not many cellular phones around. This basic E9-1 technology was developed for the landlines. And when the cellular phones became common in the late 1990s and then early 2000, the 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 technology which is used to deliver the ALE was retrofitted uh, for the wireless calls. So the way they do it is using something called the pseudo NE. It's a generic term used to identify a telephone number that links the caller, the cell tower information, and the early records together. So, whenever a call is made from a specific tower, uh, the, the telephone company will deliver a 10-digit telephone number as an early to the PSAP. That is not actually a real number, and you cannot dial that number. It will not go anywhere. The pseudo any number is also called a routing number in the telephone companies. It is generally used to identify a specific cell, cell tower or the cell sector that is used to handle the wireless 911 call. It actually comes in two flavors. One is called the ESDN, another is called the ESRK. ESRD is Emergency Services Routing Digits, which is a single number used to identify a specific cell tower or a sector or phase. In contrast, ESRK, which is Emergency Services Routing Key, it's basically one number out of a pool of numbers assigned to a specific piece of. For example, a piece of like Calgary or Edmonton will have will have a pool of number associated with it, and there is no one-to-one relationship between the cell tower and and the the ESRK, the telephone number. So it's just a pool, and randomly it will get assigned for a specific time. There is no permanent assignment. Whereas in the ESRD, there's a permanent one-to-one relationship between a cell tower or sector with the ESRD. To the best of my knowledge, at least in the TELUS territory, Canada uses only the ESRD and they do not use ESRK. So let's talk about the databases that carrier typically uses to handle the emergency calls. So the first one is the Master Street Address Guide. This is the database which maps the street address ranges to an ESN, emergency service number, and it is primarily used at the time of provisioning to verify that a house address or a business address is a dispatchable address, and it is not actually used in the call routing. At the time of provisioning, the MSAG is used to verify, okay, this house address lies between these ranges in a specific street, and the ESN associated with that range is a number. That's all it's used. It's not used for the call routing. The second database is the selective router database, or SRDB, which maps the caller's telephone number to the SN. That is actually used in the routing. When the selective router receives the call, it knows which number the call originates from, and it will look the SRDB and find the appropriate ESN, and that will tell what is the right PSAP and who are the responding agencies for that particular call, and that call will be routed to the correct destination. The third database is called the ALI database. This is what the PSAPs use to get the proper address for the caller. So it maps the caller's database to an address of that customer. This address will be sent to PISA typically within few seconds if it is a landline, And if it is cellular line, the PSAP can query repeatedly to get the updated address for the cellular phones. There is another database which is not used in 911 per se, but the TNN records is a telephone company subscriber database which has the customer details as caller ID and the telephone number, billing address. There are so many other things on the what the features the customer have ever, etc. This is a provisioning database. For the business customers, this will have additional details such as the pilot number of the PBX. The 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 TN records is one of the important resource upon which other database such as early records or MSAG Master Street Address Guide database is built. So in a way it is important, but uh, during a day-to-day 911 operation, TN records do not play any major role. So let's talk about the Master Street Address Guide. So as I told you before, it's a mapping of the range of street addresses to an to the emergency service number. In this example for Calgary, the emergency service number is 10, and, the MSAC database will have a entry like this for all the locations served by the telephony provider. So the municipality is the city of Calgary, and the street is Country Girls Place, Northwest. This is the sector. Even though it is a polygon, it is just a street because this particular street kind of goes zigzag this way throughout this sector. And the starting house number in that street is 109, and the last house number is 457. And the PSAP is Calgary 911, and the fire agency is Calgary Fire Department, and police is Calgary Police, and then EMS agency is AHS Metro. The database will have additional detail, but this is the core minimum an MSAC database will have. So this is the street starting number and the maximum house number. So uh, this is just a snapshot of a portion of the database for city of Calgary. So the different street names and different ESN will be there. This is another area served by the Calgary 911, which is basically a Rocky View country just north west of us. And street Big Hill Road, uh, 40,030 to 41,117 will have an ESN of 121, and it is served by the Rocky View County Police Department as well as the Southern Alberta RCMP. And even though it's commonly AHS, the place they are responding from is different. So this is a unique combination representing this address with an ESN of 121. So uh, the early records database, I mentioned this before, but it's worth adding some details here. Uh, Whenever there is a provisioning official operation for a landline or cellular line for that matter, uh, we call those operation MACD: move, add, create, and delete. The subscriber street address verified against the MSAC database, and the telephone number and address will be provisioned in the early database. When a 911 call is made from that landline, the street address from the AD records will be sent. I'm specifically talking about the landline. Sorry, I kind of mentioned that the MSAC database will have the cellular phone too. That is not right. MSAC applies only to the landlines. Just a slip of tongue, I mentioned cellular lines. Um, the early records will have the address of the cell tower location mapped to the ESRD as well. Uh, so for the cellular calls, it is the it is the location of the cellular tower or cellular sector, and the early record will have the ESRD. When a 911 call is made from the cellular phone, initially the cell tower address will be sent, followed by the GPS coordinate of the device as determined by a process called triangulation. So the first example is the landline. It belongs to my good friend Y. Chen, and his address is a fictitious address. It's Country Hills Place, Northwest, with an ESN of 10. Whereas this one is a cellular line. This is the actual, uh, actually not actual. This is again fictional telephone number, but it has the ESRD of 403-211-3374, and it from a cellular site located at this specific address. So this is how an early record database look like. Of course, it is going to even for Alberta and BC, this will have at least few million entries in them. And the last database is the service router database. This is yet another database that will be modified during a subscriber provisioning operation. It's a selective router database. So selective router database will have one-to-one mapping of the telephone number and the emergency service number. When a 911 call arrives at a selected router, it look up the record for the number, find out what the emergency server number is, and that will essentially tell the selected router which piece of the call should be sent and who are the responding agencies for that specific location. This is just an example for the SRDB. For this telephone number, ESN is 10. That's all this selected router need to know. Once it knows this number, it knows where to send the call. That essentially the databases involved in handling the E9-1 call. I thank you very much, and I will put together some more videos about NG911 as well as the ESN call processing in further videos. Thank you again.